Cars are back on track in Bahrain after the weekend break, as preseason testing moves into Part 2, Day 4, the first day of running on Wednesday. With Mercedes and McLaren fighting at the top of the timesheets, politics building quietly in the background, and the first official FIA press conference is now underway, the story is already extending beyond pure lap times. Here is our Wednesday summary, Day 1 of Part 2 from Bahrain. On track, Day 4 of Bahrain testing opened under near-perfect conditions. Clear skies, warm temperatures, and, unusually for Sakir, very little wind gave teams the stable environment they craved during preseason running. Action began early in the morning, with all teams back on track after a few days' rest, although many had continued working intensively at their factories. And some personnel remained in Bahrain during the short break. Around the paddock, there were also the first hints of race weekend atmosphere returning. Among the early arrivals was Flavie Barla, supporting Esteban Ocon during the morning session, the first F1 WAG appearance of the year. On track, Charles Leclerc set the morning benchmark, placing Ferrari at the top of the timesheets with a 1min 33.739x. As always during testing, the numbers told only part of the story. Fuel loads, engine modes, and program priorities remained hidden, with most teams focused on long-run understanding rather than outright speed. The afternoon followed a familiar testing rhythm, with almost every team switching drivers for the second session. Red Bull were the exception, keeping Isaac Hadjar in the car after technical work earlier in the day had cost him valuable running. Cars gradually returned to the track as teams continued system checks and data gathering. The first significant interruption came about an hour in, when Lance Stroll lost the rear of his Aston Martin at turn 11 and ended up stranded in the gravel. A red flag briefly halted proceedings while the AMR-26 was recovered. Once running resumed, teams quickly returned to their programs. As the sun began to set, bringing cooler, more representative conditions, lap times started to improve. Oscar Piastri moved to the top for McLaren with a clean lap, while Aston Martin pushed to regain mileage after earlier power unit interruptions. The final hour saw the pace increase slightly. By the end of the day, George Russell finished fastest overall with a 1mi 33.459 edging Piastri by just 1/100th of a second. Leclerc held third with his morning time, and Russell also completed the highest lap count of the day with 77 laps. The early picture suggests Mercedes and McLaren building momentum, Ferrari remaining consistent, and Aston Martin still prioritizing mileage over outright pace, with Cadillac further back and with significant work ahead. Chapter 2. Press conferences. If the track delivered the data, the media room delivered the personality. Wednesday's FIA press conference offered an interesting contrast, experience sharing the sofa with youth. On one side sat established figures, Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, and Valtteri Bottas, while rookie Gabriel Bortoleto represented the new generation, stepping into a vastly changed Formula One. Max stole the show. Asked about his open criticism of the new regulations, his response was short and direct. "We live in a free world. Free speech." On increasingly complicated race starts, he joked that teams concerned about safety could simply start from the pit lane, a dry remark that triggered smiles across the room. When discussion turned to endurance racing and a potential Le Mans future with Alonso, Verstappen answered with typical humor. "I heard Fernando is racing until he's 75. And when comparisons with Formula E were raised, his line was decisive. Let Formula E be Formula E. We should stay Formula One." Alongside the drivers, the team principals held their own FIA session. The return of Laurent Mekies after minor surgery added another familiar face, joined by Mike Crack, Io Komatsu, Jonathan Wheatley, and James Vowles. For us, comments from Racing Bull's sporting director, Alan, stood out among wider discussions about how teams are coping with the new regulations. Asked about Racing Bull's recent confirmation of their reserve driver lineup, Permain commented on both Yuki Tsunoda and Ayumu Iwasa. "It's great to have Yuki still in the family," Permain said. "He's been part of this team for a long time. We loaned him to Laurent last year for a little bit, and it's good that he's still going to be in," he continued. "Ayumu will help us out a lot with simulator running. He will do some Fridays, I'm sure. I'm not sure in both cars or just ours, but he will feature in FP1 running. A lot of his work will be simulator support for us." Chapter 3. F1 Politics. As teams search for advantages under the new regulations, lobbying between manufacturers has intensified. Drivers themselves held a private meeting during the Bahrain week, raising concerns about aspects of the new rules, particularly around starts, energy deployment, and safety. According to FIA sources, however, there is little appetite for immediate changes, with the governing body resisting calls for quick revisions so close to the start of the season. One of the most significant developments concerns power unit regulation enforcement, the Mercedes compression ratio story. Today, the FIA confirmed a proposal that, from August 1st, 2026, compliance with the compression ratio limit will no longer be measured only under ambient conditions, but also under representative operating temperatures of around 130 degrees Celsius. In practical terms, that means engines will be checked under hot running conditions that more closely resemble racing reality. This still needs to be voted on, with all other engine manufacturers and the FIA involved in the decision. The implication is clear. Mercedes may need to make adjustments to align with the revised interpretation. How deep those changes could be, and whether they carry a performance cost, remains uncertain. Over to you. We'll be back trackside tomorrow as testing continues, with Max Verstappen scheduled for a full day in the car and another round of FIA press conferences expected to bring fresh headlines, including appearances from key championship figures. Team principals Toto Wolff and Frederic Vasseur are likely to attract much of the attention in the media room. Over to you. Who looked strongest today? McLaren or Mercedes? And will Aston Martin's learning phase continue to be painful ahead of Melbourne? If you'd like continued analysis from inside the paddock, consider subscribing. Thanks for watching.